Internet. Today we're doing something a little special, as this video is a request from a subscriber. So this subscriber wanted me to talk about how God is not dead, he's unconscious. So because I'm no theologian or I am not a historian of any sorts, I tried to find a text to start and base my thinking on. So the text I found, which I found of high interest, was The Notion of God by William Ryan, chapter 4. And fundamentally, I'll link it in the PDF. It's a great read. Very interestingly enough, he's going to develop Viktor Frankl's understanding of God. So I have never read Viktor Frankl, at least at present. I've bought the book Man in Search of Meaning, but I haven't read it yet. And it's not going to be done within the next couple of months, but at some point, I'm going to read it. So why I found all of this very interesting is that Viktor Frankl is going to have a very personal opinion on what God is. So, at least as a non-religious individual, for me, God was an external force that influences and shapes how the world, our beings are developed. That's at least my layman understanding of God and what he represents. But it's not the case for Frankl. Frankl is going to give something very different. He's going to shift from that external point of view that I've just mentioned to an internal point of view. In a sense, for Frankl, God, in all of his diversity, is unconscious. So what does he mean by that? Is that God is a set of unconscious phenomena in which we ascribe meaning, a deep personal meaning, a meaning that transcends theology as we can understand it, at least how I understood it, at least before this article, that God isn't about a simple set of rituals or devices or even frameworks in which we should understand the world. It's something far, far more personal. God, for Frankl, is our inner meaning of our lives and of existence itself. Because of the thrownness nature of humankind, i.e., this is the Heideggerian way of seeing it, that we are thrusted into the world without any prerequisites. We have to build a meaning out of this thrownness. And that's what Frankl is on about, that God is us developing meaning. And even for the atheist, he argues that God is still part of the atheist's perspective, which is very interesting because he says that at its core fundamental value, God is our partner. So what does he mean by it's our partner? Well, when we talk about ourselves, when we think, when we imagine dialogues in our heads with other people, or even with just an audience, all of that for Frankl is a manifestation of God, in the fact that God is the person we talk to in our minds. He's at the core our most intimate partner in life, that everything that we think about is based on that internal dialogue that we're having with him, which is a very interesting perspective shift. Because for me, I always envisioned it as an external force. He says it's an internal force, in which it's our whole unconscious minds that are, in a way, merged or combined with the idea of a God that's not dead, as Nietzsche would put it, but interiorized in our core understanding of ourselves and of the world. Because of Frankl, we have to develop meaning. We are more or less condemned to meaning, but through that, in a way, that state, we create something that starts holding the meaning of who we are. So for him, that sin or that category that holds the meaning of who we are, that is God. So it's a very, very interesting point of view, as it enlarges at least my understanding of what a God is. It's not just an almighty being. It's a being of partnership and of privacy in a way that's so very fundamental that we can barely understand it. It's also very interesting that for him, even though the image of God can be influenced by, of course, our upbringing, our parents, our society, our culture, it's not just that. There is something at its very core that is also innate, that we have to find some meaning, some partner, someone to talk to, that fundamental core relationship that defies comprehensive and total and absolute understanding is God. And that's a very, very interesting take to have, as it's very different from what I've heard. He also states that fundamentally, at the very nature of it, when we ask ourselves, why am I suffering? Why do I have to go through this? How can a God that's supposed to love us allow for such chaos, hatred, pain, suffering, disease, you name it? And what I found very interesting with the article is that there is no clear answer. That in a way, a bit like, and that's the example given, that the lab rat does not understand why the searcher does what he does. It still happens and it still occurs for a greater meaning. And I think that's fundamentally at what the core of Frankl's argument is that God is hope, in the fact that we hope for something, we fear something, all our states of emotions are directed to something. That something is in our unconscious minds also, and it also has an echo into which we can start to think about things. And I also think that God is the ultimate hope, in the fact that even if we have no one, alone, or sad, upset, feeling desperate, helpless, there's still this fundamental core hope that there is a God that's there, a partner that will never fail us, because He is us. He's not just with us, He is us. And we are Him in a way that's very, very intimate. Here I'm not talking about broad generalities or even truth per se. I'm really talking about some intense emotional feelings here. Feelings that are so deep and so profound that they can, in a way, very hardly or barely be transmitted from a person to person. It's really an intimate experience. And to add to Frankl's perspective, for example, I am an atheist. At least I don't believe in an external force guiding our path. I think that all of that is acts of randomness. Even I sometimes think to myself, oh God, oh please no, or oh Christ, not that. And just the fact that I myself call upon God when I feel sometimes despair, hopeless, anxious, and so on and so forth, shows that there is something to it, that it's not quite that easy to exclude the idea of God in our thinking, because in a way He is, as Freud pointed out very interestingly, He is the ultimate father figure, the ultimate parent figure, I would even say, because He combines mother-father elements. He's an ultimate imago in a way, that it's not that easy to distance yourself from that idea, because it's ingrained into us. Even if you're critical about the idea of an external God, the internal imago that holds weight, to which you identify or counter-identify, the hate, the love, all of those things are binded within a relational aspect from a part of you to another part of you. And in that fact, it is very interesting to see that that binding, that relationship is at the core there, that the idea of God or the notion of God or the super meaning is always there. And in a way, it also reminds me of a very well-known quote of Lacan that said that for the atheist, God is unconscious. And I also believe that all of what happens to us has meaning because we ourselves put the meaning, but it's not always a meaning that we are aware of, not consciously at least, and not necessarily in detail. And it takes a certain types of events to, for example, for us to understand that behind that factual and practical aspect of our lives, there was something deeper, something more subtle, something more refined that we were just missing because we were not understanding the whole gestalt of what was happening. In a way, it's a very interesting framework to think about how God goes from being collective in a lot of definitions to a subjective, personal, and even, dare I say, idiosyncratic, meaning purely subjective experience. There's also this very, very interesting idea that Frankl tackles, is that the idea of fate, that your life goes in a certain way, and you don't always have the choice of where your life goes. The events happen to you without a choice. For example, you go into an accident, that's no one's choice. You sleep, you break your leg, that's not your choice. You have cancer, it's not your choice. All of those things are not our choice, they're fate in a way. But, very interestingly enough, that doesn't cancel decision making and how we influence our lives. That yes, there can be a car accident, yes, there can be cancer, yes, there can be this, yes, there can be that. But the choices that you're making, in a way, very fundamental, change your life, your perspective, your outlook upon it. And that those micro choices can have influence on the macro choices that you make. Your little choices might be able to help the macro choice, or not even to help, but sometimes even just to accept. And that's a very interesting point of view, that in a way for Frankl, fate and free will are not antitheses. They go together. Sometimes you're forced into a bad situation, but you're still going to have to make a choice. Not necessarily a good choice, mind you, but a choice nevertheless. And in this aspect, one can think that our fate is guided by God, but it's not really that, is it? Is that our fate and even our decisions are based on our personal core relationships that we've developed, our imagos that are inside of us. And in that aspect, God is perhaps a fundamental imago, and he isn't collectively dead. We still think of an idea of a God. In our minds, it's still very present, even in atheists. It's still very, very strong. But it's just that we do not give it an external role in our lives. It's like, it's not God that decides. But if we're going to go for this idea that it's a dialogue, well then an inner dialogue is what influences our choice making and who we are and our beliefs. So it's very, very interesting in a way to have that conception that God is of an unconscious nature, as it reframes the whole discussion not around the collective, not around our society or the rituals or the sets of rules or even morals. It's about the relationship from us to ourselves, what we owe ourselves and what our responsibilities and choices are in regards to ourselves. So it's very, very interesting, and I really, really enjoy digging into this subject. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of subtleties I didn't get, because as I told you, I'm an atheist and not a theologian and not a philosopher. So I'm sure there's thousands of nuances that were not grasped or too superficially. But that was my taking on the phenomena. That in a way for Frankl, God is not dead, he's unconscious. And what can I say, but it's a brilliant thought, and a thought that I think has a lot of merit. So that's pretty much my take on the phenomena. If you like this video, please feel free to leave a comment or discuss it. There's no issues, I can answer most questions, or even if I can't, I'll be frank with you. So if there's anything, please feel free to drop by in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.